The following is a segment or a snippet from the Battles in Fandom podcast, hosted by Jack Alexander. Basically, the premise of the podcast is that a bunch of Doctor Who fans come together to debate on pre-selected topics. In this case, it was the scariest televised Dalek stories, and I was invited along with Davis and Vacuum of Comments. For clarity, Davis was actually filling in for somebody, so he didn't have as much debate time. So enjoy the segment and check out the description below where you can listen to the full episode. There were like 4 or 5 topics during the duration of the full thing, so check out that in the description below.
Which monster in Doctor Who is the scariest? A lot of people say Cybermen, a lot of people say Dalek, a lot of people say the Master, but for me, I always go back to those creepy monsters, those original monsters from Doctor Who. It is the Daleks to me. So my question for you tonight, for question one, everyone, is what is the scariest TV Dalek story? Ben, over to you first.
I think when we think of a scary Dalek story, we might be picturing something like how they were depicted in the Russell T Davies era, where they were these mythic, very powerful things. Even one was a threat to the whole universe, and there was a lot of emphasis on that. But in terms of sort of pure horror and sort of creeping tension, there's very few examples because they might not always lean themselves towards that, even though the very first Dalek story was something like that. I've decided to set myself a bit of a challenge and not declare my love once again for Power of the Daleks. But I've got a video about that on my channel already where I talk about scary stories for Doctor Who. So I'm going to get that plug in right there. I've set myself a challenge and I'm going to talk about Asylum of the Daleks. Now, there are a lot of criticisms of Asylum of the Daleks, and I won't even necessarily disagree with them, but I think I can argue it in a way that makes quite a bit of sense. This is a unique opportunity because it is giving the director of the God Complex, Nick Curran, it's giving the Daleks over to him. And he really is the MVP of this episode. There are some delirious sequences in that. The hallucinations where Amy is confusing the Daleks for dancing people and she's so out of her mind. You've got the skeleton crew with the eye stalks sort of bursting out of them. There's the sequence where Rory is coming across one, and it's a lovely blend of comedy and horror where he thinks the Dalek is referring to eggs when it's trying to get out exterminate, and the end reveal where they reveal what's happened to Oswin. Again, Nick Curran is the MVP. How it's shot, it is very reminiscent of the Praise Him sequences of the God Complex. It's sort of that camera angle, that framing, and Nick Briggs is also knocking it out of the park in terms of the broken, creaky voices he's given some of these Daleks, and Coleman's voice switching to his during the conversion sequence. It makes that moment play, and it's a viscerally upsetting sequence. So in terms of, I think, pure horror, I think Asylum is a pretty good call.
Very well put. Lovely. Over to you, Will.
Cool. So the choice that I've gone for when it comes to the Daleks at their scariest, I think, is simultaneously the story that is the Daleks at one of their most simple, and that is Terry Nation's The Daleks from 1963, their debut story. Because I think it works both looking back at the Daleks as this is their introduction to audiences, like 60 years removed from now, nearly 60 years removed from now, but it also works as basically episode 5 through to episode 12 or 13 of Doctor Who as it was, like when it was the serialized, each episode goes into the next one. with the format where they've just escaped a bunch of savage cavemen who they were unable to negotiate with, who they were unable to work around and unable to beat through brute force. And then they go into the far future to an irradiated planet, and even though the threat is significantly more futuristic, even though the threat is way more sophisticated, it is still as equally brutal, it is still as equally simplistic, even if it doesn't wear the aesthetics of being simple. The Daleks, when they were created in the 1960s, were very, for TV standards in the 60s, quite complex visual creations, but with very simple, sometimes bordering on like elegant movements through the just inspired pepper pot design shape. And I also think what I love about the Daleks and their interpretation is not just how the Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara, the Doctor and the companions at the time, are continually on the back foot. They're in a hostile, irradiated planet where they need to get the anti-radiation drugs, but they also are competing with a threat that will basically kill them at any opportunity, but they're a threat that are very disassociated emotionally to them. At one point, Susan laughs, she giggles, and the Daleks like, stop that noise. These are hostile, frightened little things, horrifying things that we only get a very brief glimpse of at the end of part 3. When the little claw, I think it's like a gorilla glove covered in Vaseline, but shush, it's scary, I promise, comes out from under the blanket. And that's really the closest look that we get from them. For something like, let's say, Dalek from 2005, where it's Henry Van Statten's base, that is an environment that the Doctor and the supporting cast have some control over. But for something like the Daleks, where they're in the Dalek City, they control the city. And I also think, last point for now, is that the black and white cinematography is like simple and a bit cheap from Christopher Barry and Richard Martin, but I think it goes so far, like the black and white monochrome environment and the atmosphere and the pulsating sound effect from the city itself. I think that even though the I think the 1965 movie with Peter Cushing is a great spectacle with great orchestration and music and great like cinematic scope. I think even though, in the movie, the Daleks are so close you can feel their fire, I think actually bringing it more onto the smaller screen, the 4:3, the black and white, it makes it feel a little bit more grounded and a bit more scary, in my opinion. But, yeah, yeah.
Nothing? Yeah, sure, yeah. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, all thoughts and opinions expressed and not of my own. I need you to close your eyes and cast your mind back to a very specific memory. You can't, because this is my memory. This memory is of Brighton 2005, possibly 2006. You're in the Doctor Who exhibition. There is a section near the end. You've seen all the monster costumes. You're 10 years old, you know. But then there's this big button that looks just like it came from the episode Dalek from 2005, written by Rob Shearman. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with it. And then once you press this button, metal bunker doors open with this loud, shrill effect. You find yourself down a military staircase, just these stone steps and loads of echoes everywhere, when the Dalek theme plays, and out of the stairwell rises a full-size scale Dalek screaming at the top of its voice at you. And just the fact that I've lived part of the episode Dalek is absolutely why I think it deserves to win today. That would scare the pants off of any kid and any adults. When you're faced with the modern revival image of a Dalek, it's overwhelming. They are scary. And that's what Robert Schumann gets down to a T. His entire goal with the episode Dalek is to destroy your Dars jokes about Daleks, to restore them from being a pop culture joke. So every single beat, every single line of dialogue, every kill needs to be brutal and unforgiving and make you learn to be scared of Daleks again. But just look at the whole episode. It's an episode populated with a vulnerable Doctor who is terrifying in his own right. Humans that are scary. It's a not a nice environment to be in, even before the Dalek gets out. And when you have your Doctor comfort blanket taken from you, when the rug is pulled out, that's when kids get really scared. The Doctor in this is even more scary somehow, spitting across the screen and turning the most impressive deranged performance we've seen in the show. Oh no, my childhood hero who I've been with him for 5 weeks, 6 weeks. He's a funny little man. Oh no, he's a genocidal monster. Leaves a kid really without a moral compass. Owen Davis of Doctor Who TV said that Daleks, after Series 1, this was 2006, Daleks lost their fear factor. That's been a complaint since Series 2. And it does kind of point you in the direction that Dalek nailed it so well right out the bat. I do have a little bit more. Do I have more time? Just a smidge more?
You can add a bit more before we start, yes.
Oh, yeah. It's a modern base under siege, so we'd never seen one of those in Revival, but it is so effective when bunker doors close and a Dalek goes upstairs. These all feel like transgressions. It all feels genuinely scary that the monster from your nightmare is coming at you, and it is an unstoppable force that every character will not stop amping up. It's going to destroy cities, Rose. It's going to kill everything on your world. It's going to get you, and you can't get away from it no matter what you try. It's a walking nightmare. But also, most importantly, I think you make Daleks scary by making them pitiable. There's funny moments and there's scary Dalek moments, and sometimes they're badass, but when a Dalek is like relatable, empathetic, this is one of the most complex villains we've had in the show since. That's when you really get the Dalek. That's what you get. The core concept of the Dalek, why they are scary, is because, oh no, these aren't just sci-fi monsters, are they? No, there's a beating heart of real fucked up Jubilee DNA in here. And it's all the best parts of Jubilee taken to TV. And the fact that you, as an audience, are led to empathize with a mass genocide machine, I think is really scary.
Lovely, very well put. Okay, for the first time tonight, fight.
Rob Sherman said he doesn't like Dalek. I win.
Death of the author. Wow, I'm inciting death of the author early this evening. Doesn't matter. And when he revisited the material, he made it even more scary and more intimate. And
what does it say in the question? TV Dalek story, or am I going blind?
I wasn't aware Robert Shearman was in the TV episode Dalek, so I don't really care about his opinions for the sake of this question. Anyway, hey, Will. Actually, I was all guns gear and ready for take out the Daleks, but the Dead Planet, to me, maybe it's just the fact I grew up with Cushing rather than the original. When I watched Daleks, The Dead Planet as an adult, it just strikes me as a cold and sad story. I don't get terror. There's terror in that cliffhanger, but from there we get quite a range of we get some happy Daleks, we get some curious Daleks, we get some trickster Daleks. They're conniving and sweet at times. Thoughts?
I wouldn't say sweet, but no, I absolutely agree that the Daleks are quite conniving. But I think if you think of just what is a scary story as moments of strange imagery, or just moments where there's jump scares, or where there's something that could kill you around just around the next corner, I'm more thinking just the prominent sense of unease and off-kilter sensation that you get just by being on that dead planet. I think that everything from the petrified forest at the beginning, this is something that it's a story that has an unknown, almost unknowable history before they even get to the Metal City, which is by its nature from Raymond Cusick is quite alienating and quite the corridors go on forever. This is some way where you can get lost in, and it's somewhere where you can't really control. Van Statten's base, the Millennium Stadium, is a really cool location, but it is somewhere where they can close the bulkhead doors. I get the sense that the Dalek might actually struggle to get out of those doors if it is trapped on a lower level. It's only because the Doctor decides to let Rose survive that the Dalek is able to get to the top level. Whereas I think they don't have any control over their environment in the Daleks.
I hate pulling this card because you are the odd one out with a classic series entry. We have, me and Ben, we have hardcore horror environments, whereas I love the description you gave. I'd watch a full video essay of that. In fact, I did once. What you're describing is like a slow burn German expressionist horror, And that's great. That is technically horror. That is pretty gothic. There are jagged shapes all over the place. I'm not completely scared by that.
I would also posit the yes, the Daleks is definitely somewhat unique in that I think it's quite withdrawn. The Daleks sort of slowly come onto stage, but I do think if there is something that takes away some of the uniqueness, and it's not the fault of the episode by any means, but I think we are so familiar with Terry Nation's sort of style and approach. And I think because we got so many stories, quite similar to that in similar veins, the Daleks just feels a little bit less special as a result. And eventually you just kind of get tired of seeing the Daleks being put into damn death.
Well, in the Daleks, I think it's they're quite multifaceted, but over the course of the serial, you get the sense that they are losing control. It's early on because they're monitoring the Doctor and companions from their prison cell. They've got a security camera on them, and they say, "Okay, we'll let them sleep. We'll give them food. This will give them a false sense of security, and then they'll be much more malleable to manipulate." But then when they start escaping and they're able to, and they want to try and get control over the situation, and they test out their own radiation drug, and you see that these are incredibly insecure creatures that makes them way more wild and unpredictable. While I love the methodical nature of the slaughter in Dalek, I also think that there is an argument to be made that an unpredictable opposition that is quite unhinged. There's a wonderful shot, I think, in part 2 or 3, when the iris of the Dalek eye stalk is contracting, and you get the sense that these are not all in their head. And especially when you get this image of fascism in the 40s, of goose-stepping Nazis, of order, of authority, of power. Fascism is very rarely internally a powerful organization. It is often quite unhinged, full of infighting, full of insecurity, built upon dogma and myth. And I think that the Daleks, being less than 2 decades removed from World War II, from the Nazis at time of broadcast, I think that is one reason why they resonated so strongly in the 60s.
It's a good point. I think it makes them effective. It makes them great metaphors, definitely. In terms of scary, they're active participants for not many episodes at all. They in the Daleks are almost passive. They're observing themselves, they are analyzing, they are just as confused as our characters are, and we spend a lot of time with them just figuring stuff out. That doesn't feel that ominous to me. I can understand them to a degree. For real fear, for real scare, I want something that's just beyond me. And even with Asylum as well, that's Daleks at their most scared and pitiful and vulnerable. Whereas mine, we've got a big vulnerable Dalek, but he's driving the plot. He's the main motivator. He's coming for you.
I would say Asylum, in terms of everything we've spoken so far, Asylum's kind of the best of both worlds, because on the one hand, you've got the Daleks at their most powerful with the Parliament. It feels different because we know now the Daleks aren't necessarily just going to get blown up by the end of it, or they're not just going to escape and teleport out. Like, we're not just going to get one of them just teleporting out, and when they're not playing the last of their kind beats anymore, they're a horrible status quo. They're part of the universe, and it kind of feels like the Doctor can't really defeat them. He's just gotta escape from them. But you also have in the Asylum like Daleks on the back foot. They are unpredictable in this one, and they're behaving like we've never seen Daleks behave before. So you've kind of got 2 different approaches of what could make the Daleks scary, and you kind of got both of them playing at once, but they don't contradict each other, I feel, and they don't clash. And also, if we want to talk about making Daleks pathetic and kind of losing ground, Again, the Parliament of the Daleks, while the Doctor is worried about it, and he pretty much tells Amy and Rory, make them remember you. I interpret that as, yeah, we're going to probably die here, but make them feel it, make them go out swinging. But they've fucked up here. They're trying to they've got the asylum's become out of control. They've made a mistake, and now they're getting the worst enemy to clean up their mess.
And I think that's part of the framing. The fact that is the Doctor truly vulnerable? He says this vulnerable line at the start, but the Daleks have called him because he's the Doctor. He's the Ultra man who's going to save the day. And at the end, he does. He mugs them off and he leaves. So is the Doctor ever really?
But he's also
to the audience. Does
but
he
the
feel like
Daleks also. This is actually the only one where if you think about it, the Daleks win. The Parliament does win. They get what they wanted, and I think with Oswin at the end, if you want to talk about Daleks being kind of, pathetic and kind of like fascism just not working and the whole ideology just not standing up, I think the fact that Oswin was smarter than any of them, and they had to convert her because she was smarter than any of them and she was better than them, and the fact that the ideology is not helping them out tactically, and the fact that they've had to be hypocrites to their own system that they're this dogmatic towards, it's got dents. It's not just Moffat and Horan just flexing and pulling creepy imagery at you. No, there is a genuine point to be made there.
I guess that with the beginning of Asylum of the Daleks, I guess can't help but see flashbacks to scenes in like Batman comics when Commissioner Gordon would like call Batman to do a mission for him. It doesn't seem like they're really that sort of threatening in the first act of the story. I personally, setting aside my own personal issues with Asylum of the Daleks, I think the only scary stuff there is actually in the asylum, but even then it just sort of just feel like it's a bit of a grab bag of actual spooky stuff, like, oh, let's have skeletons coming to life, oh, let's have Amy hallucinate, oh, let's have this, let's have all of this happen, and Rory slides under a door because the Daleks can't shoot for shit. I think it does feel like
does Will like Asylum of the Daleks?
It just feels like it's a bit of a grab bag of spooky tropes rather than something cohesive around the idea of a Dalek asylum, which doesn't really feel that in character for them. But I'll tell you what absolutely is in character: the Daleks being utter pricks in Terry Nation's The Daleks. One of my favorite. One of my favorite.
We can wrap it up, right?
Yeah, one of my. I would say last point for me, at least, I think, as we wind down, is that is the sense that these Daleks are ideologically absolutely immovable, whereas in Asylum of the Daleks, like, they start the story asking their greatest enemy for help, and in Dalek as well, you get the sense that because the Dalek is mutating and changing, that it is able to be negotiated with. It wants freedom, and it is changing over the course of the story. Whereas I think there is something quite scary in this immovable force of nature that is this epitome of fascism from the 1960s being shown on TV. When they've got when they're talking about their plan for the future of Skaro, they say, if we need radiation, we can never rebuild the world outside. And the Dalek response, we do not have to adapt to the environment, we will change the environment to suit us, which is the perfect encapsulation of fascism. You don't make the world a cohesive place, you bend the world to your will in order to regain your sense of power. And at one point at the end, the Doctor offers the Daleks the TARDIS. You can have my ship, and you can not explode your bomb. And they say, okay, once we've exploded the bomb, we're going to use your ship to fly out of the city. And the Doctor's is absolutely aghast at this lack of reasoning, of this morality. He shouts, this senseless, evil killing, which is one of, I think, a definitive moment for the First Doctor. He's absolutely aghast at everything happening around him. So, yeah, the Daleks are pretty scary. And Davis mentioned it earlier, the cliffhanger ending of part 1. The sheer terror of the scream. That is so good that Joe Ahern had to rip it off in Bad Wolf.
Okay, well, I think the both of you are making great video essay points, but especially with Ben,
I'm gonna say it has all been very civil so far. It's been very. I feel like I've been learning a lot. I've been watching a TARDIS editorial or reading a Black Archive book.
Look,
You
I
need to
thought
start
that
you need to start getting dirty, boys. You need to start getting dirty
All
here.
right.
Go
It's,
for the
it's,
win.
it's only round
Alright.
one.
Yeah.
nah, fuck
are
off,
you-
Ben.
Are you telling me that? Oh, sorry. Actually, did you want to go first? Wait, no,
Oh,
that's
no,
not the
there
direction.
was a real point attached. Yeah, it was these are very pretty points, but there's no. I'm still not feeling any fear. In Asylum of the Daleks, the Doctor is a janitor. That is literally the pitch of that story.
Are you
I
saying
look
that's not
at
scary?
no, not really. And there's one
I
too
would
many
be
jokes
terrified.
about Matt Smith's chin. There's an oversense of twee, and you know I love me some Series 7A. The twee sets in quick and hard, and is a total diffuser. Clara kills lots of tension for me, and I actually quite like her dialogue. But whenever it cuts back to her, and she is making souffles and talking about Rory's pretty nose, man, I'm taken out. And then, as you say, like Will said, it cuts back to some random assorted Dalek imagery. This one's a ballerina. Okay, he can't hurt me though, can he?
I'm sorry. The man who has brought a Terry Nation script to us is having a go at me for structure and pacing.
Oh, there's
I'm
nothing
not saying
scarier
it's
than slow
wrong, but
pacing.
My God, that's galling.
No, but it's true. It is true. I admit, when the Daleks are not on screen, the story itself does grind to a halt. They spend an episode and a half trying to get over a 4-foot gap. But the question is, what's the scariest Dalek story? And if we're talking about the Daleks, then for me it is Terry Nation's The Daleks, at least in terms of just their baser elements that are absolutely excelling. There's a reason why Dalek in 2005 had wanted to rebuild the legacy of the Daleks for a new audience, for a new generation, because Terry Nation set the foundation so well. If he hadn't have done that, you wouldn't be getting 2005's The Quarks, written by Rob Sherman. There's a reason why the Daleks have
Done it. You know he could have done it.
he could have done it, but that's not the
You know,
timeline
he's
we live in.
regretting that he's not in that timeline now.
There is some sort of alternate dimension out there where the Dominators became the 1960s Doctor Who icon that stuck around.
Well, in your own words, you said that Dalek is the core turning point of Series 1, where it becomes a different show, a scariest show, and that is done entirely by Nick Briggs, Murray Gold, Billy Piper, and Chris Eccleston, because they sell the fear at every single step of that episode. And then they make you pity it with the fear after. With zombies, there's Dalek zombies. I should be more scared by this. At no point am I thinking this. Now I'm watching that zombie over in that corner of the room. This doesn't happen at any point because the dialogue is so quick and cute.
Challenge you to not find this bit where he goes into the intensive ward and the Daleks and he's backed into a corner screaming and begging while the plungers are coming for him. I had my doubts up to then, but that bit, that's a good one. And I do think it is pretty well paced and there is a good sense of escalation. That comes later in. And I do think, borrowing a little bit from Science of Library, it is a pretty well paced and pretty well structured story. There is a sense of escalation. The Doctor ends up on his own by the end of it. As things get worse, things get a little less bombastic, a little quieter before it hits you with that reveal, and yeah, and
it's subjective.
Oh,
it's all subjective.
Power.
Well, power is quite a scary one, but nobody brought it.
It's true. Order. I think I've heard enough now.
So folks, who do you think won out of us three? Let me know in the comment section below. But ultimately, it was Jack's decision. He chooses who wins the round. He chooses who wins the whole episode, basically. So in order to know who won the round and the episode, you'll have to listen to the full Battles in Fandom episode. There are links in the description below. Thanks so much to Jack for having me on. Thanks to Vacuum of Comments and Davis for being such good competition. And I'll see you folks next time.